All right, hello and welcome. It is Tuesday, July 10th, and we are back from our summer break. Hopefully, you had maybe a little bit of a summer break online. Maybe you continue doing your normal routine activities, but certainly the campus closes down for a little bit, and maybe you got some sunshine, and maybe you played a video game or something like that. But other than that, that's basically what I did. I guess I'm just informing you what I did instead. But here we are. It is Tuesday. You have finished out your first round of assignments, and we're going to start out this Tuesday like the rest of our first sessions in the remaining weeks, and start out by discussing a little bit of peer review, which we have a couple of submissions here. Where'd that go? Why is that not popping up? There it is. Maybe. Come on, Logic. You can do it. So, we have, 7 submissions here from your 2D platformer assignment. We will start out by talking about your 2D platformer submission, and then we'll switch it over and talk about the new assignments for week 2. So if you have any questions, please let me know as we're moving along here. And I'll start out with a discussion of all, like an overview of the assignment as a whole. We'll talk about all of them, and we'll kind of look at the waveforms of each one of them. But then, of course, we'll go through each one at a time, taking a listen. So what I have here in my logic session, I have each student has their own track. So you might see your name up here, and on each track, we have all of the submitted files. So over here, wow, okay. This is going to be, for some reason, whenever I do a screen recording and, what is going on here? Screen recording and only in GoTo Training, does it really kind of slow down? Hold on a sec, I want to see something. So over here, let's see how long it takes to highlight this. Oh, not too bad. Over here, these are all of the main loops. These right here are the intros. And these over here are the endings. Okay. So these are the these are the 8-bar main loops. These are the 2-bar intros and the 2-bar endings. Let's see if anything is going haywire in my computer. GoToMeeting is taking up all the percentage. Why is GoToMeeting slowing everything down? Not the recording. Interesting. Let's see here. Hold on just a sec. This is going to be untenable. All right, so let me pick back up here. And I was discussing each one of the different sections here. And we have our 8-bar loops over here. And this is going to be most of the music that you will hear during gameplay. These 8-bar loops will rotate around and will randomly be heard, will randomly play back and rotate around. Let's see here. Come on, computer. There we go. So you will hear most of these play back to back. First and foremost, the main loops need to loop. There should be no gaps in the playback, so any files like this, where there is a small bit of silence at the end of each one of them, will prevent seamless playback. So files that look more like this play all the way through. They look more correct. These three files look really kind of low in volume on the next track here. I try to highlight those. There we go. Let's see if it actually highlights them. There we go. So these are quite low in volume and will probably be kind of overrun by the sound effects in the game. Kind of the same with these over here. These look a bit too low in volume. I'll just move my mouse around to point at stuff. See if that'll work. These look really, really quite short. Are we sure that those are main loops or not intros? Let's see if we can somehow, I'm pressing, oh, okay, there we go. We got to zoom. No, they say main loop. They look really short overall. So, we'll have to pay attention to those. Overall, we need consistency in the mix and consistency in the instrumentation. We need to make sure that each one of these cues sound like they come from the same composition, the same song. So we need to have them all be in the same key, in the same tempo, in the same time signature to make sure that they feel like one cohesive composition. The intros, they need to build, kind of rise up into the main loops. Again, gaps at the ends of each one of these files is going to cause silence during playback. The intros need to build up. They need to rise heading into the main loops. And then the endings need to end. So ending with silence is appropriate here. They need to reach silence before getting cut off by the end of the file. So files like this are going to be cut off at the end. They're just going to turn off right at the end of the file. So definitely watch out for that. You want to make sure that they nicely fade into silence. Well, not these. All right. So let's see. I'll press zoom. I'll press zoom. And let's see how long it takes for it to zoom. Oh, look at that. About 3 to 5 seconds per each click. That's going to be, gotta definitely anticipate that. All right. So wonder if it's, I have to try it with my dual screen. See if it's like because I am using multiple screens or something. All right. We'll go through and listen to them one at a time. Hopefully the music will play back seamlessly. I don't think that will be affected. Let's see. Zoom, zoom, zoom. And zoom in. Oh, there it goes. Okay. And we'll start here. All right, let's listen to the first one. So a good energy from one to the next. Everything is formatted correctly. Everything seamlessly transitions from through each cue. They're set up to loop and play back. So everything works pretty well overall. There's a good energy to kind of drive the pace of everything forward. I typically warn against kind of this half-tempo cue in one of them, because the rest of the rhythm is kind of more straight ahead, and 1 and 2 feel similar to each other, while 3 feels more like that kind of subdivided rhythm. And then, so it depends on how often it gets chosen and how often it plays in the game will definitely determine how well it works. All right, let's go ahead and scroll. There we go. Stop. And go over to the intro cues here. The waveform of the third one looks a bit concerning. We need to make sure it kind of builds up. Yeah, probably need a little bit more of a build-up, really in each one of them. Oh, no, that wasn't a scroll. I'm clicking on my fader. Click, fader, go. I need to... Now that I know it's go-to training, I need to contact them and see what are they doing to massively slow down my logic. All right, so let's see if I can separate these. Click, move, drop. Click, move, no, not stroll. Just click, move. Just makes me feel like I don't understand what how logic works or something. Come on, get with the program. All right, so there should be a bit more of a build through this cue, because it works as a loop. There's a little bit of a drum roll at the end, but a little bit more in the build in the second half. Let's try the second one. Yeah, again, a little bit more of a rise. Use the second bar, and then this one kind of just sustains too long. There's the snare roll, or the couple of kicks and snares. But yeah, use the second bar to build up a bit more through the cue. Do 3 endings here. I would end on probably end on the tonic. Just end on one last chord. Everything kind of seems to stop suddenly. So bum, hit that last chord. Yeah. So just needs that last chord or last note or in the ending cues to kind of fill everything out. Here in the chat, I figured I tried thinking of adding diversity, felt like I had drawn too much energy. I'd be taking away the feel of the main loops. Cool. All right. So yeah, those are the main things that I hear. A little bit more build up or energy through the intros. One last chord in the endings, and I'm not necessarily sure that the third main loop is not correct or won't sound cool. I mean, it might be a cool variation overall. But it's something to definitely consider when you get everything in the game. All right. Cool. Good stuff to start with. Let's do second one over here. There we go. All right, let me hear the first one again. All right, so I'd say the main thing that's thrown me off is the lead line that's panned all the way to the right. You're not necessarily sure how especially in a game, how somebody might be listening to it, whether if it's meant for an iOS or an Android game on a phone, then you really don't know how they'll be listening to it. If it is on, maybe they only have a mono TV. So anything that's like just hard panned, like when I was listening, I only heard one side of it. And then I heard the rest of the mix by just having the right headphone on. So yes, I mean, it's good to use the stereo field to pan things, but something as important as a lead line shouldn't be panned hard left or hard right. Or you should, I mean, you can, doesn't have to always be panned straight up in the middle, but you can have something over to balance it on the other channel. Then beyond that, I would say watch out for the repetition in the melodic line. If I play this again, basically repeats that phrase. So it's effectively the same thing as it goes around. Use the entire 8 bars to develop each one of your melodic ideas. Let's listen to the second one here. This one starts getting to be the same thing, but I noticed then that the other side had like the melody that's actually developing. So watch out for the balance between those. Here in the chat, the main thing I was curious about is how it was mentioned the music is chosen randomly in the game, and which one plays. Would we be placing all of these into the game and it just chooses which it wants to play from there? Yeah, it is. It's random. So you have 3 main loops. And the game, well, I guess you'd start with 3 intros. It randomly chooses an intro. It has numbers 1, 2, and 3 to choose from, and it just randomly chooses. And then the main loops play. It randomly chooses a main loop, finishes the 8 bars of that, and then randomly chooses another one. That means it could play the same one. It's completely random, so it could play the same one 5 times in a row if it wanted to. But it's not really making a choice. It's just a random number generator, which is how a lot of parts of game development happen. But yeah, that creates more variation overall. So you don't have control over the order that they play. I mean, in a true sense, yes, you could have control over it, but the way the game is set up for our purposes, it is random so that you don't have to infinitely choose. It just chooses for you. All right, so let's go ahead and do these 3 intros. All 3 of them sound pretty similar. They all have the same kind of idea with the. You hear that in each one of them with a couple of, and the drums are similar, and then a couple of other instruments on top. Actually, are the drums similar? No, that has a little bit, has a different rhythm. But use the second bar to build up. They all feel like they're almost like endings. Because they doesn't help that they do actually end, but they need to use the second bar to kind of build everything up. So subdividing the beat works very well, so that here, let's count this one. You go 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 dot 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 dot. Kind of build everything up, and you can even go beyond that to it's one of the most basic ways of building up energy. And then 3 ending cues. Right, that sounds like it has way more energy than the rest of the mix. And it's probably because the bass is just really loud and all of that. It just kind of jumps out of nowhere. Yeah, that's a little bit more, I don't know if about appropriate's the right word, but a little bit more of a direct, expected ending. Let me try. I'm going to take one of these endings, see if it'll let me move it. Come on, grab a file. There we go. Drag it over here. See if we can do something like this. See if this makes any sense. Yeah, I mean, the idea is a good one because it's kind of like, oh no, you messed up. But I think the bass is just kind of a bit loud. It kind of jumps out compared to what you were doing previously. All right, so good couple of other things to discuss there. Let's take a listen to the next one here. All right. So I think the first thing that I noticed in the first two was that the lead line was a little bit kind of back in the mix. I was kind of having a hard time focusing on what was the lead line. Especially here when the piano, like I hear the sustained lines a little bit more than the lead line. So I'd probably bring up just increase the mix overall, but kind of more focus on the lead. But in the third one here, I heard more of the, I believe that's an accordion kind of line, but the kind of the alternating back and forth feels like it's just kind of following the chord changes. So, and the alternating kind of back and forth kind of feels a bit jarring. But everything fits, everything loops properly. I'd work on the mix a little bit and just the development of the lead line. Maybe changing the rhythm a bit too. I think that's the same in each one. Yeah. So those would be the main things to focus on. Let's go ahead and try 3 intros here. Yeah, you definitely need more of a build-up because these could just sit here as a loop and they would make sense. And if I jumped back over to this one. And I think some of it is just that drum, the snare and the pattern, the hi-hats, everything just kind of lines up and it just sits there as a 2-bar loop. Intros wouldn't loop. So intros wouldn't loop. They would build. They go da, 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 and the drums would like have like a roll, and it wouldn't make sense. It would build and build and build, and then it wouldn't make sense to fall back down. So watch out on the overall kind of rhythmic shape and the intensity and the buildup of those intros. They almost feel like extensions of the main loops. Do 3 endings. The main thing here is to make sure they don't get cut off at the end. Make sure that they reach silence before getting cut off. So it sounds like you have added a fade at the end of each one of them. There's a couple ways to think or consider how to set up the endings. The instructions say that the music needs to end in 2 bars. And that's true. One extra thing is if you need it to extend, if you beyond the 2 bars because of reverb or instrument decay or like a little bit of tail or something at the end of the files, then that's perfectly fine. You can extend beyond the 2 bars just as long as the music ends within 2 bars. The notes are within 2 bars. The other thing in here is you probably don't need to extend the drums. Like these chords end, I think they end on beat 1 of bar 2. So, which is a good place to end to give you enough room for all the instruments to fade out or to reach silence. But you don't need the drum pattern to continue. That needs to stop also. And even that minor chord works because it's like an ending and you've lost. And it just needs to hold. You don't need those last couple of drum hits. And just hold on that beat 1 of bar 2, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. Well, you've done it there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. And just all that little extra stuff at the end doesn't need to happen. 2. So this probably can end a little bit earlier on those. Please stop. Thank you. on each one of those endings to give you enough room to nicely fade out to silence. All right, so a couple of tweaks there. Build more through your intros. Focus on the lead line on each one of these cues and just the overall mix. And if you are increasing the mix of the main loops, of course, the intros and endings need to also change, and then make sure the endings reach silence. All right, very good. Let's get set up on the next one. So I think the main thing I see here is that these three main loops are also 2 bars. And not the required 8 bars, which are these. Come on. Oh, logic. I did none of that. I clicked right here, and I dragged right over there. There we go. All right. Let's see what these 3 sound like. All right, so yeah, it's a good place to start. You've got the rhythm and you got the strings in there. But yeah, each one of these needs to be extended out to be the full 8 bars. It's a bit difficult to tell where it goes. Intros and endings. Are these 1 bar? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those are 1 bar, and these are 2 bars, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2. Yeah. So, yep. Intros and endings need to be extended out. Main loops need to be extended out. 3 endings. Yeah, and those need to also reach silence. They feel like extensions of the main loops. So more development needs to happen on those. Yeah, here in the chat, those all sound like sections of the main loop. Yep. So I think there's probably more ideas there that we're not hearing. So here we are. Come on. Highlight. Highlight. There we go. All right, let's try the next one here. All right, great energy. Fits really with the kind of the pace of the game overall. Good melodic development in each. Solid production. One thing I noticed is it feels really quite mono. There's a little bounce back and forth between the left and right channel, but most of the time it feels straight up in the middle. So while I commented on earlier on having stuff that's just in the right channel, this one I'd say it's actually a little too mono and could have a bit more, just like, not the lead line panned all over the place, but just a little bit more space in the mix. Good rhythmic changes. Melody uses the full 8 bars to develop, so a lot of cool stuff to work with there. if it would allow me. Thank you for stopping. I'll move on to the intros. And do 3 of these. Oh, come on. Come on, buddy. There we go. Those work very well. They should build up energy very well and kind of head into the main loops. Let's see if they will actually play back as expected. Come on, Logic. You can do better than that. I guess you can't do better than that. That's fine. Oh, come on. Logic. All I want you to do is put one file next to each other. Let's see if you can do it. If I zoom in real close. So it worked pretty well to move from one intro to a main loop. Let's go ahead and check out the 3 endings. Yep. Cool. Second one is not as exciting as 1 and 3. Just sitting on that one chord. So I might just switch up that one a little bit, but you definitely hit the correct feel of the endings, where they are, again, putting a period at the end of the sentence, just taking what you were doing in the main loops and resolving it to silence. Yep, the drums. The drums, bass, melody, everything heads in the right direction to that final kind of hit. So, great work. Everything is formatted to work properly. 8-bar loops, the 2-bar intros feed well into the 8-bar loops, which feed well into each other and into the endings. So everything formatted very well. Just a couple of tweaks here and there, mostly on the details aspects of it. So very good, nice work. And yeah, I think it really fits the energy of the game very well. Could feel myself. Always like to make up kind of what game I'm playing when I hear these kind of pieces there. So gave me a kind of an action game or racing game kind of feel to it. All right, let's try the next one here. So at this kind of slower pace overall, I'm counting these as 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. This is where the snares hit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold on. I got myself. Why is this? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So at the pace that they are at, they feel like 4-bar loops. So you're going to need to extend it out. I'd actually say speed things up overall to really help with, again, with the energy and the pacing of the game. Anything that's that kind of laid back, that's doom doom doom. Let's see. This feels like I almost kind of want to hang out with the aliens as opposed to defend the universe. So kind of work with the pacing overall. Let's see. Everything looks like it's set to loop. Everything is formatted and will transition. I would start out with a kick on each one. I think the thing that was throwing me off was the first one. It doesn't, I don't know, where it transitions feels a bit off. Maybe there's not a kick in the first beat. There's like an open hi-hat. Is that what's... Feels like I'm missing one of the beats in this particular file. And if it would allow me to drag it around. Oh, come on. Drag. This is... Yeah, it's like slightly shorter than the other ones, I think. Is that true? Come on, drag. Yes. Logic's not cooperating. But just check the timing or check the rhythm on that first one. Make sure that there is an initial hit there. 3 intros. These look like they could also use a bit more energy. More percussion. Actually, melodically, they work out very well. Yeah, it looks like they're getting there. Maybe it's just more volume in the second half, or the things that are kind of building, putting more of a spotlight on them. Or like more drums in that one. You got a little bit of the snare roll. I think the third one is the strongest. It has the most rise to it overall. So they're definitely getting there. It's these like one-off snares, these real big waveforms that are throwing me off a little bit. So it might be a compression thing also, if everything is through a compressor or limiter. And 3 endings. The main thing here is that these all need to be finished before the end of the file. Let's try these. Yep. So I think they're doing the correct thing. It is probably ending again on beat 1 of bar 2. It's the second part of that bar that you don't need all that extra kind of flourish. So like I said, you could use the entire 2 bars and then have everything end and have a little bit of instrument decay and reverb tail at the end. Although some of these synths sound like if you just held them and sustain, they would just sustain forever. So you'd have to figure out something for them to end. But if you end it beat 1 of bar 2, it should give you enough room to end. And just kind of hold that last note. Which you've kind of done, but you add these little touches at the end. Or you do add those, but they also hit and end before everything finishes. So those are the main things that I'm hearing. I think there's a lot of good stuff from the intros and endings. And the main loops need to be extended out to develop those 4-bar loops. All right. And the last one here, I pulled all of these from the final submissions, but this one looks like I had to go with, oh, where's my other tracks? Why can't I scroll down? For this one, I had to pull what was actually posted on the peer review page. So, hello, scroll. Scroll up. Scroll down. Do I have any way to get down there? Oh, Logic. Well, I don't blame Logic. It's GoTo Training slowing everything down, this only happens to me during class, like when I'm recording and using GoTo Training and using Logic. And it's only happened recently because this is the way I've done my class for years. So I don't know. There's some new update in GoTo Meeting or Training or whatever that has decided to make my computer not like itself during that period of time. All right, so these I only have main loops to listen to. So let's check these out. All right, all three of these are sounding very, very similar to each other. Mostly what I hear is like a single pad arpeggiator playing the same chords, if not very similar chords. There seems to be a couple of other elements below that. I think there's some drums in there. I think there's some other instruments, but they're very, very low in the mix. So I don't know if it's a balance thing overall, but push up the elements that aren't repeating. If you've got the same progression on and the arpeggiator along with the chord changes, it really feels like it's missing a melody, feels like it's missing a bass line. I think there's drums in there, but it's way, way far back. I mean, I hear them on like rolls and I hear crash cymbals. So a lot more development, and actually, are those 8 bars? 1, 2, 3. Yes, they're 8 bars. Yeah, it seems like the focus. If this was a band recording, like I'm hearing like one mic that's on the arpeggiated synth, and I hear some bleed from the other ones, but a lot of those elements need to come forward quite a bit more. So I think there's more stuff there that we're just not really hearing overall. All right, so good stuff to listen to. Gave us a variety of things to talk about. I always feel that it's certainly beneficial for the individuals that you submit, and I go through it and do feedback, and there's like a video format, and if you're here in the class, we can talk back and forth and questions and all that stuff. But I also feel it's very beneficial, maybe even a bit more, to see everybody else's versions, because you've been locked in your own bubble with your composition for that first week. But now you get to see everybody else's versions, and the feedback on FSO definitely works towards that also. But you get to see my comments and feedback on everybody's project and all the good stuff and all the bad stuff to consider overall. And I often feel that it focuses or it gives you a better direction in your composition, and allows you to revise it, and gives you some good directions for that too. You do have the ability to revise your compositions all the way until the end of the month. Even when you are next week, yeah, in week 3, you're doing Wise, and getting that set up to work with your music and sound effects. And even as you're going through that process, you will realize some tweaks and things you want to work on, and you can still fix everything or update it and revise it all the way until the end of the month. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to turn it over at this point to the archive to discuss the new assignments for week 2. You have a new game called Angry Bots. And I will stick around for a few minutes afterwards to chat if you have any questions you would like to add. But other than that, it was a good session, a good amount of stuff to listen to. We'll meet again on Thursday. Remember, Thursdays are our open sessions, so we can listen to stuff. You can ask questions if you have any concerns or discussion that you want to bring up about the new assignments. Yeah, please let me know. But other than that, if you have any questions, yeah, let me know. And other than that, we will see you again on Thursday. Thanks. Right. Let's go ahead and discuss the new assignments for week 2. So we have a new project. We have a new game. We have a new soundtrack. A new style of game requires a new approach to the music. And so our game this week is called Angry Bots, and it is a demo that is provided by Unity Games. Again, this game is built in the Unity game engine. Next week, in week 3, we'll start talking more about the technology, and we'll discuss game engines and audio middleware and some of the software and tools that are kind of running all of this stuff in the background. And like I've said before, saying like game engine is like saying DAW, kind of, sort of, not really, but sort of. Basically, in the same way that a DAW is the tool that you use to make music, a game engine is the tool that a game developer uses to make a game. And just in the same way that there's Logic and Pro Tools, and they give away free projects, and like, here's some recorded music for you to check out and test out how our software works, they do the same thing with games. They can provide versions of the games that people can tear apart, and we can get in there with our music and sound effects. So our new game for this week is a different style of game, different approach to gameplay overall. In Angry Bots here, you are this mercenary infiltrating a robot factory. The robots are none too happy that you're there, and they are bent on your destruction, so they will come after you. And your job is to kind of go further and further into the game world. This is a much more complete game. There is more stuff going on. Let's see here. Where am I? More stuff going on than 2D platformer, or more like there's like a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where 2D platformer, the score would just go up and up and up. This one, there is like an ending to it. You can actually beat the level. It's not a full game. It's just like one level of what would be a much larger game. But it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to complete the first time. And this one is kind of a much more futuristic, techie designed world. Lots of kind of sci-fi influences, robots and explosions and lasers and rocket launchers and sliding doors and technology and all sorts of interesting things for music and sound design. It's not probably an all ages, family friendly kind of game. much more kind of dark and intense. And our main focus with the music is the idea of ambient and action, switching back and forth between lower intensity ambient music and higher intensity action music. And when I talk about ambient music, I don't really mean the style or genre of ambient music. Not like Brian Eno, music for airports, kind of just a slow drone that never changes, never does anything. Ambient just means less than action. Sometimes it's known as battle and exploration. But this is the idea of there's a period of time in the game where you're just kind of wandering around the level trying to figure out what's going on. And lots of games do this, where there's a period of time where you're exploring, and then all of a sudden an enemy jumps out and there's battle music. And the battle ensues for a particular period of time, and then you either win or lose the battle, and you move forward from that. So same sort of thing here. We have to, if you did nothing else in the game, if you just sat there in a corner and hid forever, you would hear this ambient piece of music. Ambient doesn't mean just a drone, just kind of slow and boring. It can have energy to it. It can have good instrument layers to it. It can have drums and bass and harmony, maybe even melody, but probably we'll leave that up for other pieces of music. But it can have structure to it. It can have development, and it really shouldn't just be one slow drone that doesn't do anything and just sits there. So there would be an ambient piece of music until a battle happens. And when one of the battle happens, one of these robots comes out to attack. And you'll notice that the battles are pretty short, right? So this guy wakes up, he comes to attack, you only hit him a couple of times, and he explodes. This guy comes to attack, and I kind of toy around with him a little bit, run away, let him chase you. And eventually, you'll either destroy the bad guy or the robot, or they will destroy you. And whenever these battles happen, the action music comes in. And then when the battle is over, the action music will leave and return back to just the ambient music. The ambient layer or the ambient cue will always be there, will always be playing. And when you fight one of these robots, then the corresponding piece of action music will come in. There are 3 different types of robots, and each one of them has a different action cue or action theme that's attached to it. And whenever you battle that particular robot, you will hear its action theme. And then when you defeat that robot, that theme will eventually go away. It'll fade out. So you have an ambient cue, and then you have 3 action cues that represent each of the different robots. They can play at the same time and will play at the same time. So you will, no matter wherever you are in the game, you will always be hearing the ambient cue. Then one of these battles starts and the corresponding action cue comes in. So we have to understand, how do we add or subtract this action music whenever we want. That's one of the main challenges here. We have to be able to get into a higher intensity action piece of music and then return back to the ambient piece of music as seamlessly and invisibly as possible. So, how does the game know when a battle is happening? And the answer to that is it uses health points. It uses, you have health points, and the characters have health points. You might not notice, but this yellow bar on his back is actually a game meter or a health meter. And it tells you how long it takes a lot to destroy you in the game, because it's mostly just to test out and have fun with it. And defeating one of these robots doesn't really take all that much time. So we'll have to discuss how we get back and forth between this lower intensity ambient music and higher intensity action music. Let me explain each one of the robots. The first one here is called the buzzer bot. This is the kind of flies around, is sort of annoying. It zaps you with these little lightning bolts. These guys are called the spider bots. They're basically bombs on legs. They come after you, and if they get close enough, you'll either destroy them, or if they get close enough, they'll self-destruct. They really don't do much except for chase you around and become annoying. These are the most frequent kind of robots on the map. There's another one over here. And let's go inside here. So, and then here is the third robot. This guy is called the mech bot. It's this big RoboCop-looking robot coming down the way here. These I would kind of consider like a mini boss. They're kind of harder to destroy. You have to unload into them to eventually defeat them. And then there's just the same robots across the rest of the map. The good thing with the music and sound is we really only have to focus. I mean, you really you see everything in the beginning of the level, and all of your music and sound effects will be populated through the rest of the game. So let's go ahead and bring up some of the other material. Let's see. Here's the PDF that you get. Hello? Is that not working? Shrink down. There you go. Okay. So here's the PDF you get. It discusses all sorts of different aspects of the composition of the project. You have action and ambient cues. Why do I keep turning away? There we go. You have action and ambient cues and a discussion of each one of those. How to play Angry Bots, hopefully, should be relatively straightforward, not too difficult to control. You can use the arrow keys to go up, down, left, and right. You can use the mouse to look around and then left click or just click on your trackpad to fire. There's a couple of listening tracks as reference. Different classic games in the style of this kind of sci-fi action game. Musical style. Here we're really looking and focusing on intensity. We want to make sure that whenever those robots come after you, that it's really powerful and strong and intense. You need to feel like the danger of these robots coming to attack. Nothing too chill, nothing too laid back. Sometimes I hear some music and it's like, hey, robots aren't so bad. Let's go ahead and have a cup of coffee or something like that. And they're like, yeah, sure, that's no problem. Which is not what you want. You want intense and strong and loud, and robots are chasing you around with lasers and missile launchers and all sorts of crazy sci-fi sort of stuff. So you want to match that aesthetic. On the other side of that is another thing that I get that is better, but it doesn't work too well, is like Robot Dance Party, where everything is like super hypey dance and not that dark or intense. It's like party time, and that doesn't necessarily work either. So intense and strong instrumentation. I have suggested instrumentation, synths and pads and driving bass lines, gated effects, sweeping filters, bouncing delays, fast percussion, heavy distorted guitars, big fast drums, large brass and strings, cymbal swells and impacts, anything that portrays strength and intensity. Then there's descriptions of each one of the cues, which is basically what I'm discussing now and how they'll play back. What I really want to get to is the asset list down here. There's screenshots and descriptions of each one of the robots and how they should sound, and just a general overview. Then the asset list. There's a total of 7 files that you will create for this. I mentioned 4 of them so far: the ambient cue, buzzer action, spider action, and mech action. They're each going to be 1 to 2 minutes long, and they will loop 16-bit 44:1 stereo. So don't think about this as 4 individual 2-minute long compositions. think about it as one composition that can be broken down into 4 parts or 4 stems. So each one of these layers is going to contain unique instrumentation. You shouldn't repeat any instruments between the different cues, so that when you hear those particular groupings of instruments or that thematic line or melody or instrument, whatever it is, you can recognize whatever robot's coming after you. You almost train the player with the music so that they can hear what's coming up next. So let me explain how these 4 files work, and then I'll get into these short stingers here. So when the game starts, if nothing else is going on, you are always hearing the ambient cue. Through the entire game, that 2-minute long ambient cue will be looping around and around. The ambient cue should be subtle. It shouldn't be too much in your face. It can still have a bit of rhythm to it. It doesn't need to have strong percussion, but it can maybe have some hi-hats or a arpeggiated bass line or some sort of gated effect that will foreshadow the rhythm that's coming. And you should you want to lay down the foundation of the progression. This is going to map out how things are going to play back in the how all the layers are going to play back together. All right, so we hear the ambient from the beginning of the game. As soon as you've been attacked, you either shoot the robot or the robot shoots you, then the action music will come in. The action music will come in immediately. It will start playing from wherever it is in the loop, and you will hear action music. This point, you need the strong percussion. You probably need a couple of layers of percussion, bass line, harmony, and probably a thematic. I don't necessarily want to say instrument like a melody, but thematic. Thematic line or thematic instruments or something that tells you what robot is coming after you so that you can give that sort of information and help the player. All right, so first guy, the battle starts, and as soon as he's destroyed, the battle ends. The music's going to start fading out at that point. Then these guys jump awake, the spider music will start, and as soon as they're destroyed, it'll stop playing and it'll fade out over time. So let's go ahead and load up some examples here. Talk my way through a couple of examples of what this might sound like. There we go. All right, so as stated before, you are going to have 4 2-minute, somewhere between 1 to 2 minute long cues or layers, or even maybe think of them as stems that can play back together and play at the same time. The biggest challenge here is going to be dissonance and clashing notes. You want to make sure that there's a lot of similarities between these cues. They need to all start at the same time. They need to end at the same time. They need to be in the same key, in the same tempo and same time signature, and they need to all loop together. They need to follow a common chord progression. Because even if they're in the same key, if they're all headed to different chords at the same time, it's going to probably not work so well. So you need to, with all of the things that are the same, key, tempo, time signature, looping, starting, stopping, the things that are going to be unique are your choice of instrumentation. Each cue should have unique instrumentation that's only found in that cue. You really shouldn't repeat any instrument lines. You shouldn't copy anything, because when the game puts it all back together, it's going to double things up. Like if you have the same drum pattern in multiple cues, when you play them all together, then that drum pattern is 4 times as loud as everything else. So make sure that you have unique instrumentation and then a unique composition. Each cue should have certainly a strong rhythm. That's going to be the most of the action part. And then a thematic melodic line or thematic instrument or thematic phrase or something like that that helps identify whatever robot it is. Probably a bass line to help, although you don't need necessarily a bass in all 4 of them. A chord progression, but you don't also need to put all of the voicing of every single chord in each one of the cues, right? So you write your chord progression, you're going to have 3 or 4 voices per chord. Well, all 4 of these don't need to have all 4 voices every single time. Maybe one of them is just the root, follows the foundation. Another one, you've got the 3rd and the 5th. Maybe another one, you get the 1st and the 5th, if you've got 7ths in there. And you can start, if you write out the chord progression first, you have a basic common structure or skeleton to work from. So let's go ahead and check this out. Just get started here. Let's play. Start with the ambient cue. All right, I am going to I'm going to play the part of the game, just mixing these up and down. And the whole reason this thing is going to work in the game is because when the game starts, all 4 of these pieces of music are going to start, and they're going to play together. They're going to reach the end and all loop together, so they're going to constantly be in sync. The only thing is, the player's only going to hear this first one at the beginning. The 3 others are going to be silent. Then the buzzer comes in. So let's do this. Game starts. Game starts, and you hear just the ambient cue. And then once you get attacked here, that's the buzzer bot, and so the buzzer music will immediately come in. And you're going to hear that buzzer music as long as the battle's going on. And then once you defeat that robot, it's going to start fading out. And the game is going to do this a whole lot better than I can and control it in the DAW. But it's going to fade that out. And whenever that robot attacks, that music comes in. So this is the buzzer by itself. So we've added the low strong strings. You got some big timpani hits in there, big low bass drums, and there's these little white noise sweeps somewhere, I think, in here. There you go. So it adds a little bit of layers. So this ambient cue is mainly made up of, has a hi-hat pattern in it, but mostly is a chord progression. This is outlining the chord progression. No, it's a couple of notes that are just kind of presenting the foundation of that chord progression. Here in the chat, it says, so that means we're making tracks separate, so that means the music can't clash. Yeah, you are probably best to think about it as one whole composition. So what I end up doing in my composition session is I'll set up a region just like this, like a particular length that depends on your tempo of your music, and you'll count out how many bars will fit, how many bars you want to use that will fit with between 1 to 2 minutes, and then just start adding instruments. I would often start out with a basic just piano. Just start writing your chord progression, even though it's going to end up probably a very synthetic and very electronic and all that sort of stuff. Start out with a piano or a basic keyboard patch, write out your chord progression, maybe write a few melodies that could work with it, figure out what instruments you're going to use, and then just keep stacking them on top of each other so that it becomes one cohesive composition. But eventually, they're going to be bounced out separate from each other so that the game can use them individually as it needs to. All right, so that is the buzzer. And once that buzzer is defeated, it eventually fades away, back to the ambient. And then you go after the next one. So this spider pops up. When that spider pops up, the music is going to immediately add in the spider cue. It sounds like this. Hi-hat, bass line, a little melodic line that we'll hear is actually a double of the mech cue. Here it is with the ambient. And then this guy's destroyed. This guy chases around a little bit. When that guy's gone, the music will fade out. Until you get after this guy. And this guy is the mech bot. And he comes and he attacks, and it sounds like this. So with that one, you've got strong brass and strings. You basically have the high strings to match the low strings from the buzzer cue. You've got a strong lead melody. This one, where's it coming? Right about here. And you also have the ability to have 2 or even all 3 robots on the screen at the same time. So we could bring in the buzzer cue. Bring in the spider cue. And all 4 of these cues should be able to play together. No clashing notes, no clashing rhythms. Again, think about it as one cohesive composition that with multiple layers that can play at the same time. There are 3 other files that are listed in the asset list. The music buzzer stinger, the spider stinger, and the mech stinger. And those are there to help the transitions from the ambient into the action. The action cues are going to hit quickly, and you do not know where they're going to be in the music. So to help this transition, we add in stingers. And stingers are going to play when the action cue is introduced. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to divide this up like how it will sound in the game. Just kind of set this up so everything is set up correctly. Something like that, like that. ends. And then we'll put fades. So we got a fade out there. And a fade out there. And a fade out there. All right, so when the buzzer action comes in, when it comes in here, you'll notice that the buzzer, it'll come in probably in the middle of some phrase somewhere, doesn't have a strong impact, just kind of jumps up. So, oh, I was actually at the end of a sweep there. That's actually kind of luckier than it typically is. Turn off my fade there. Thank you. Let's play that again. So it just comes in there. And so to hide that sudden transition, we can throw stingers in here. And the game, again, the game's going to do this all for you. A stinger should hit have a strong impact at the front and fade out to silence very quickly. It's meant to distract and create a little bit of interest at that whatever the random point that's going to transition. Provides a little bit of consistency, even though it is kind of just going to be a random point. If you're familiar with electronic music and like drops and impacts and things like that, that is commonly what a stinger could be. Stingers are typically have a strong impact, maybe some low end, maybe it could be a drop. And then there's another layer or two on top of what I call like some modulation or some filtering or a pitch drop or a filter sweep or a synth arpeggiator or something like that. These are all kind of strong impacts. They should not be tonal. They should not be rhythmic, because since you don't know where they're going to be played, it might clash. So a strong hit, lots of reverb, tails out to silence. There's another one. And like I said, they are there to cause a bit of distraction as you're going from one piece of music to the next. So here's what it might sound like when played against the action cues. And again, the game does all of this for you. You just have to create the material. So it should provide a hit, and then the one should fade out, and the other piece of music will already be there. Here's another one. And here's a third one. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of where to start with the composition. I'm going to play one more here. Let's get rid of that and this and this. All right, here's another ambient cue. So this would be a good example. This would be a good example to say that the ambient cue doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't need to not move or do any or have any changes to it. Here you can hear the outline of the chord progression. You hear a arpeggiated phrase. You hear some percussion, but it's not like a kick, snare, hi-hat pattern. It is sporadic and meant to provide emphasis. Here is the buzzer cue. Here it is by itself. So it follows along. It's got a little melodic line to it. It's got drums. That's probably the most important thing to add for the action cue. Here's a spider. This one's mostly drum kit. Mostly drum kit, got a lot of crash cymbal in there. And here's the mech. Mech sounds cool, it almost sounds like an alarm going off. Definitely have to watch out when all four of these are playing to make sure it doesn't completely overload the master. But a common progression, a common pace, a common rhythm to it that allows each one of these layers to be added and subtracted at any point. Then the game, whenever a new idea comes into play, it can just fade in the corresponding piece of music as necessary. So hopefully that helps in describing how the composition is going to be set up. I do want to show off a couple of things with the sound effects for the sound design this week. Please let me know if you have any questions as we go along, or if you're just watching the archive, then you can send me a message if you need any sort of clarification. So that's the compositional side of things. You also have the sound design, creating sound effects for Angry Bots, 22 sound effects. Again, this is, like I said before, because it's a little futuristic and robots and weapons and things like that, explosions. There's a lot of fun opportunity for sound design. So let me just load up the sound effects. And I would suggest that you do something similar to last time, where you would load the original sound effects into Logic and use them as reference. So let's see, I'll close down this session. Don't save. Get a brand new session here. Now, when you go download this assignment, you are going to get a folder that looks like this. It's called Angry Bots Original Sound Effects. And it's going to, you unzip it, and it's going to have two folders. One is called To Replace, and the other one is called To Use. There's a total of 60 some odd sound effects in the game, and I don't require you to do all of them. You can use some of the original ones to supplement them. So the one that's called To Replace, these contain the 22 sound effects from the original, these do contain the original sound effects, but these are the ones that you will have to do for the assignment. And the reason is these are the more interesting sound designy kind of sounds, if that really makes any sense. They are the more obvious weapons and robot kind of sound effects. The ones to use, these are some ambiances and interior shots. Then there's like bullet impacts and ricochets, and then there's also footsteps. So you're probably not going to win any awards off of your footstep design. You're not going to get hired off of your ricochet. Well, who knows? Maybe you would. But more likely, this is a focus on the music. and the more important sound effects. So, something to consider, but we definitely are going to do and replace the replace to replace. I include the other ones there because you can and are encouraged to do all of it, so that whenever you show this off, you can say, I did everything in this game. Otherwise, some of the original sound effects will be there still. But let's just use the to replace folder. I'm going to take all of these sound effects and I'm going to drag them onto a track here in Logic. Open, place all the files on one track, yes. It always comes up with, oh, actually this one doesn't. If it comes up and asks you if you need to change your sample rate, just change the sample rates of the files, that's fine. You're going to bounce them out anyway. All right, then once you have the original sound effects on here, you would probably spend some time, you'd probably clean this up a little bit. They don't need to be right on top of each other. So take these and separate them out a bit. Oh, that didn't work. Well, Logic, come on. You can cooperate with me. There we go. Do that. Do that. And you don't need to watch me do all of these. But just trust me, separate them out a little bit so that there's a little gap in there. So when you bounce everything, you have a little room. Then you would create a couple of blank tracks down below. And build all of your sound design directly below the original sounds. But listen to the sounds as reference for what they should sound like, how loud they should be, what's the shape or like the waveform look like, how loud is it, how long is it, yeah, just the basic properties of that file. And then you would build your own sound effects down below. I'm going to cheat here and just drag these down. You would not do this. Don't do this. This is a bad idea. But basically, if I were to fake it, these would be all of my effects. And you definitely mute out the originals when you bounce. You don't want the original files in there. They're really obvious to hear. And you have, then you'd bounce these out and you'd have your sound effect. And you'd go through and design all of these. Let me actually play these. I think this is going to work. Let's see if these broadcast. Airlock door close. That did not work. Hold on. How about this? Let's try that again. There it goes. Okay, this is airlock door close. There are a lot of doors in the game, and there are all the Star Trek kind of doors that open and slide open and close and do all that stuff. So there's a door open. There's a door close, and the assignment has pictures of everything, so you can play through the game. You can see what's what. A lot of times you can get away with the close just being the reverse of the open. Maybe there's a little like chunk, like ka-chunk at the end as it locks closed. But with these, you can use with hydraulics, pneumatics, servos, motors, those kind of things give you those kind of great mechanical sounds. Ambience, exterior rain. It's a rain loop. 30 seconds. Yours doesn't have to be that long, but just a consistent rain clip that you'll hear when you're outside of the robot factory. Interior hum. This is when you go in. This is like room tone. I always think that sounds like the inside of a spaceship or something. Like, as if I knew what the inside of a spaceship sounded like, but I'm sure. Something like that. Flying buzzer destroyed. There's a lot of sound effect. There's a lot of explosions. So the two main things in the game are not main things, but things that have a lot of sounds are doors opening and closing and explosions. So what I would suggest that you do when you go do the sound design is you should be familiar with like the Westar Music Library to get access to sound effects there. There's another resource called freesound.org, which is a website. It's kind of a community-driven website. And free Westar is great because it has a whole bunch. It has the sound ideas library, which is a great, like, very high quality sound effects library. Freesound.org is community driven. There are lots and lots of sound effects on there. There's also lots and lots of very bad sound effects that are not worth anything. But there's also some very good stuff in there. And for the types of things you're trying to do, a lot of that stuff can be covered there also. So what I would do is say, okay, I need explosions. So go off and search for a whole bunch of explosions, bring them back in, and then combine them all together to make the sounds that you need. Don't work on one sound at a time. Don't say, I need a flying buzzer explosion. Go find an explosion, bring it back, edit it, name it, bounce it. Then go, oh, I need a mech explosion. Then go back out, get another file, bring it back in, edit, name it, format. Like, that takes too long to go back around and around and around like that. Do it in chunks. A lot of times when I do sound design, I'll spend one day just looking through sounds. Like, just go find my library of whatever it is. And I'll just go, here's 25 sounds that I'll eventually put all together. Then maybe the same day or maybe the next day, I'll go back and I'll just edit everything. Put them all together, layer them up, see what works. Then often, if there's time, I might have another day that's just like mixing and bouncing and formatting and delivery, like finalizing everything. So, so if you work in big chunks like that, it often makes the process a bit easier. This is Zap Electric. This is when the lightning bolt kind of shoots out and zaps you. Mech Alert. All of the robots have an alert sound when they recognize that you're there. They kind of wake up and attack. So there's kind of an alarm sound there. Mech Destroyed Explosion. It's an absolutely huge sounding explosion, which is good for that very large mech robot. These are patrol mech footsteps. As that thing is walking down the hallway, you will hear these footsteps for footstep 1, footstep 2. I think they completely cheated and used the same sounds. You could probably make it a little bit more interesting than that. Missile explosion. So this is when it fires at you. So it shoots its missiles at you, which is this shoot missile sound. So it fires them, and then it either hits you or hits a wall or something like that and explodes. The spider alert. Right? So a little couple of beeps as it wakes up. You don't have to do exactly the same thing. Just kind of do some other stuff. I've heard very cool things where people have done like vocoded robot voices when these things like wake up and it goes attack or something like that. Spider destroyed explosion. These are the bombs on. That's when you destroy it. This is when it self-destructs. I think that is a horrible explosion sound. It's a real big letdown compared to the other explosions. Proximity. This is when the spider bots are coming after you. They beep. And it's very important. Just make that one little beep. And you don't want it to be very long, because what happens is as it gets closer to you, the beep gets faster and faster. It goes beep, 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 beep. And so if you have like a long sound, that's just going to stack up and sound all sorts of crazy. So all you really need is one really short sample. Spider self-destruct, that's the bad explosion. Interior doors open and close. These are the Star Trek doors that slide open and closed. I just think that sounds like somebody's window being rolled up or down. Locked door opening. Once you get, you You stand next to these computer terminals and you hack the computers, and it allows these locked doors to open. Player death. This is when you die. That's not true. That's a gunshot. That is the incorrect sound. Let me get that out of there. Player hit. This is when you take damage. Player shooting. This is the gunshot sound. It's pretty important with that sound. That is going to be a looping sound. And it is important that you match the timing of those shots, because I think it matches the animation or the muzzle flash in the game, which is this. So this is player shooting. Oh, muted. Right, so that's just a loop going around and around. You would probably be best served 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 in here. Just build your shots right below that and just use the same timing so that it creates this kind of smooth loop overall. And the last one is, I think it's the last one. Yeah, terminal hacked. Right, just some sort of electronic sound as the terminal is being hacked. I've heard people like type it on their computers, or sounds like a keyboard, or there's a voice in there that says terminal hacked. I don't know why a computer would tell you it's been hacked, but whatever. So that hopefully, again, will give you a good direction for your sound design. Always make sure that you mute out the original track. Don't include the original sound effects in there. Create the 22 sound effects for Angry Bots. And I think that should be it. That's certainly quite enough for me for this afternoon. We did the peer review of the submissions, which was always great. Again, it hopefully encourages everybody to submit also for next round. And then we talked about your Angry Bots and your Angry Bots music and sound design. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them up in the chat, or send me a message. But other than that, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. And I'll see you again on Thursday. All right. Thank you very much.